What is going on, guys? I've been meaning to make this video for you guys for a long time. I actually tried to shoot this. I was recently down in South Central Alaska, and I meant to shoot this video for you guys out on location. I was actually shooting some loons, and I had a surprise with some black bears. But I really was trying to shoot a video, and I wanted to talk to you guys about some of the realities of wildlife photography that I feel like most people don't cover. You only ever see like the highlight images, and I wanted to get down into some of the weeds. It's probably going to piss a few people off, but I feel like it's something that we got to talk about. So stay tuned. We'll go over the loon photography. I'll give you guys some tips on how I shot those images that I'll show you guys here in a little bit, and I'll tell you guys a little bit about the black bears that gave me a heart attack. But shoot, without further ado, let's jump into it. All right, so the first thing I wanted to talk to you guys about before we get into the loons and the black bears is really I want to get into some of the realities. And I know we talked about it a little bit in the intro, but I wanted to talk about some of the realities of wildlife photography and where it's going and where it's been and some expectation management, really. And if any of this pisses you off, I completely understand. This is my opinion, but let's jump into it. So, first and foremost, the way the camera industry is going, at least from what I'm seeing, is these new mirrorless cameras. I recently people were talking about the R5 and this new Z system that's coming out, the ZS, and Sony's coming out with some pretty banger cameras. But what I want to talk to you guys about is the technical aspect of photography is almost dying. And what that means for wildlife photography is you're going to have to step your game up in some different ways. In the past, you could separate yourself based on how fast you could recompose a photo or how fast you could move your autofocus point and nail that exposure or exposure compensation and all of the technical aspects of wildlife photography that would give you this beautiful final image, right? That's not the case anymore. These new mirrorless cameras that are coming out, they're offering, you got eye autofocus, animal eye autofocus. They do the exposure compensation for you. You can meter for the whole scene, so you don't really have to worry about, am I going to blow out the highlights? Am I going to crush the shadows too much? The camera is telling you, and you're seeing it real time in the EVF, what adjustments you're making and what your final image is going to get. So what does that mean for us as wildlife photographers, right? How are we going to separate ourselves from the guy who just got the brand new hotness, the brand new mirrorless top of the line camera? You're going to have to start putting yourself in some situations and getting yourself out there and doing things that the people who buy these really badass cameras aren't willing to do. And what do I mean by that? I mean by you got to get out there and you got to put yourself in situations, whether that's environmental, whether that's really early in the morning, really late at night, going places, hiking way back in to where you're going to get these phenomenal shots of animals that it doesn't matter if you had a point and shoot or a film camera, you'd be getting phenomenal images. That's where this is going to start heading for wildlife photographers, right? You can no longer really rely on cameras to set you apart from the next guy. And on that same facet, I want to talk about people have this weird philosophy that if I could just get that new lens or if I could just get that new camera, I'd be set, I'd be made, I'd be making the best wildlife images or the best images ever. Now, what's the reality behind that? You spend, I don't know, let's say $1,500 on a new lens. Is it really changing how much you're doing photography or how well you're doing photography? And in my opinion, the answer is no. You know what I mean? Would you be better suited off spending $1,500 on a trip, going to a location where you got some new species? It reignites the passion you have for this, and you're doing some different things that you normally wouldn't do. You're spending more time on composition and making sure you're nailing the photo. That's where I think money needs to be spent. Now, don't get me wrong, gear makes a difference. I also don't like when people say gear makes no difference, because it does. But what I mean by that is you just really need to get yourself a decent kit, right? It doesn't need to be incredibly expensive. It doesn't need to be over the top. It just has to be good value, good priced, and covers all the bases. It does what you need to do. You're going to need long reach. You're also going to need zoom sometimes to get out and get some of that environmental wildlife stuff. But those are the two things gear related that I want to talk about. A, you're going to have to start doing some different things because the cameras are leveling the playing field. And B, no new camera is going to make you better. You're going to go from having mediocre low quality images to mediocre high quality images. But the overall end result is you still have mediocre images. The only thing that's going to set you apart is learning the techniques. Not the technical side that the cameras are going to handle, but the actual techniques of wildlife photography, right? And that's behavior, that's low angles, that's getting out there when the weather's, conducive to good photography. What else do I have written down? Some more realities of wildlife photography. If you're anything like me, the second I get on an animal, my brain, and I don't know if it's my OCD or what it is automatically thinking about what am I missing, right? So it doesn't matter if I'm with the most majestic animal that I could find. I'm already thinking like, okay, when I get done with this animal, what's the next one I'm going to find? And that's something that I have to stop doing. I have to get out of that mentality of always looking for the next better, biggest, greatest thing and focus on what's in front of me. And that's something I have to deal with. So I wanted to reach out and tell you guys, what the reality is, you're not going to find anything better. What you have right in front of you at that time is the best thing you have. It's the best thing you're going to have, at least for the near future. And you really need to capitalize on that. Whether it's a vole or a ground squirrel or just a common bird in your backyard, really focus on getting the best image you can get of that animal when it's in front of you. Moving on. This came up in a conversation I was having with a good buddy at a local camera meeting. And it really sunk in when he said it. Someone's work is always going to be better than yours. Always. It doesn't matter how phenomenal that one image is or what animal you finally caught. Someone has almost that same image, but done better. Better light, better background, better environmental shot. It's just better. So if you're doing wildlife photography to try to get the best image, it's just not going to happen. You have to get in the mindset that what you're doing is something you love doing, whether it's documenting the animal or, just building a portfolio around that animal. You really got to stop trying to get the best image because it's not going to happen. And what else I mean by that is you can't have your expectations so high that when you do get an image and it's something you really like and then you put it online and then you see, a hashtag for the same kind of animal and you're like, well, that shot's so much better than mine. And then you're judging your worth off of somebody else's work, right? And you gotta stop thinking that because someone's work is always going to be better than yours. What else do I have here? Like I said, I wrote it all down. All right, this is a big one. Your work is never gonna look good small. And what I mean by this is people spend, thousands and thousands of dollars and they get these high megapixel cameras and these phenomenal lenses and they go on these incredible trips and they get these really awesome images and then they upload it to a 5x3-inch screen on your cell phone and it lives on Instagram or Facebook or Flickr or whatever it is that you upload your images to. And that's where this image lives for the rest of its life and on a hard drive or in a Lightroom catalog. And it's like, shoot, you could take some of these pictures with a cell phone if your intent was to only ever put it online. What you got to start doing is getting out of the headspace that everything you're doing is going to wind up online because it's not, and it shouldn't. That's not where your work deserves to live. Your work deserves to live giant. Print it huge. If you get an image that you love, you can kind of see what I'm talking about. That Lynx image, my bucket shot for the year, I printed it as large as I could. I think it's daggum 6 feet tall. And it was because that was the only size in my head that would justify the majesty of the image that I captured and what it meant to me. So stop thinking about your images as just what can I use to fill up my Instagram feed and start thinking it as, how big can I print this? You know what I mean? What do I need to do? What medium best shows off the work that I made? And I think nine times out of 10, it's going to be printed large and hanging on a wall somewhere or in a beautiful photo book on a coffee table or something. That's where these beautiful images you're working on need to go. The reality of wildlife photography is it's never going to look good 5 inches wide. It's just not because you're capturing these grand scenes and these grand animals, majestic animals, and you're displaying it on a 5-inch screen. So I think if you really want to hone your skills and you really want to share your work and really get across how powerful the work you're doing is, print it large and display it. Let people see it in a displayed platform. Moving on. All right, this is a personal opinion, and it's just kind of how I attack anything, especially with photography. If you want to be a good wildlife photographer, it has to captivate you. It has to almost consume you, right? Because so much goes into wildlife photography that, in my opinion, doesn't go into any other type of photography. So when you look at portrait photography, you can control the light, and to some aspect, you can control the model. When you look at landscape photography, you can't control the light, but you can control the location, right? If you keep coming back to that spot and you just keep waiting for the conditions to be right, you're eventually going to be able to capture that beautiful landscape with beautiful light, right? It just takes a little bit of planning. Now let's talk about wildlife photography. You don't have control of your model, like portrait photography. You don't have control of the light because it's you're outside 90% of the time not using flash, and you also don't have any sort of control over location of where that animal is actually going to end up. All three of these things have to align. The stars almost have to align for you to get a beautiful image. And that's what I think captivates me so much. But what else that means is the time you need to invest to get these images, right? You're going to have to do scouting. You're going to have to come back when the light is right. You're going to have to hope that the animal is local to where you are when that light is right. I mean, these are all things that boil into you getting the right image. So the reality is, in my opinion, it's probably the hardest type of photography to do well. Now, it's really easy to go in your backyard and snap a high noon shot of a chickadee or a small bird, right? But that's not, I don't think that's probably what you're after. You know what I mean? Although you could get some awesome pictures of small birds, you're really going to have to work at this, and you're going to have to work at it a lot, and it's going to consume you. And if you want to be good, you have to let it consume you, and that's the point I'm trying to make. And finally, the last point I want to make about the reality of wildlife photography is when you're doing wildlife photography and you're doing it well, you're not making content. You're making photography. And I know this might piss a little people, or probably a lot of people off, but when you open up social media, I would say, at least mine, 90% of what I see is content. It's not photography. Now let's talk about what is content, right? You ever see those images of people who tie shoelaces to their lens and they get that perspective look, and then they have like a lighter in the middle, or, you know, some weird fairy lights, or although they're cool pictures, it's content, right? Is there any marketability of those images? Is anybody going to want to buy that image, print it large, hang it on their wall, display it in a gallery, put it in a book? Probably not. What I mean by content is you're taking a picture, regardless of how cool it looks, and it's going to live on social media because that's where its medium is. That's where it looks the best. Small, on social media, you scroll by it, you double tap it, and you know, you never think about it again. That's not really what you're going to be doing with wildlife photography. You're not going to be able to post, 6 or 7 images a day that you can just go create in your backyard. You're actually going to have to work at this. And what I mean by photography versus content is you really want the images that you're posting and the ones that you're working towards to be something that when someone sees, they're like, man, I could put that on my wall, or I could put that in a book, or, I'd pay to have that. That's photography versus content. So start wrapping your head around, what do I have to do to make good photography? Not what can I do to just make content to put on social media. Because like I said, there's going to be a loss of translation in how your images look big and how they look on the screen. Sorry, I know this was kind of a rant session. What I do want to talk about is some loon photography that I got into over the weekend and the whole purpose of my trip. I went down to a pond, and the weather conditions were decent. It was overcast for most of the day. There was a little bit of rain. Storms were rolling in and out. But I actually found a loon, right? And I've been looking for a loon for a while. There are some up as far north as I am, but the majority of the loons that I see are a little bit more south. So I went down south, and I ended up getting some beautiful pictures of loons, and I'll put them up so you guys can see them. I did mean to film this video down while I was shooting it, but the issue is right now there's a lot of training going on in Alaska. Between the Air Force, the Army, and all that stuff. And they just kept launching F-22s the entire time I'm trying to make the video. And I don't know if you've heard of 5th generation stealth fighter, but they are ear-numbingly loud. So, I couldn't get mad because they're badass, but it just didn't really make for a good video location. Yep. Launching more Raptors. Location. So I figured, I'd get the pictures and I'd get some quick clips of what's going on with the loons, and I'd come back and make this video. But what else I want to tell you guys about is what snuck up on me while I was shooting these loons. So the location that I was at was this small pond. And what's cool about this little pond is there's this little boardwalk that walks out into the pond and then actually starts to dip down into the water. And what that allows me to do is get water level without needing a flotation device or putting on, waders or anything, because I'm going to be in the mud. So I'm down there taking pictures of loons. Now the dock that I'm talking about, it's a floating dock, right? Like it's on these buoys. And I'm laying down, I'm taking pictures of loons. And I start to feel the boardwalk do one of these numbers, right? It starts rocking back and forth. And I'm like, what the heck? Who is sneaking up on me right now? Like, that's not a cool move, right? So, like, I snap around getting ready to kind of ask this guy why he's sneaking up on me, thinking it was a fisherman or I didn't know what it was. So I turn around And lo and behold, there's two black bears that are walking up the little boardwalk, and they're cutting off my exit. And they're kind of looking over, trying to see what I'm doing. And I did get some pretty cool images of the bears, so I'll put some of the images of the bears up, and hopefully you guys can enjoy that. But the scary part is these bears, they weren't afraid of me at all, right? So once they cut me off from behind, I tried to make I was making loud noises. I was yelling at them, trying to get them to shoo off because they had cut off my escape back to the road to where my truck was. And it kind of made me nervous. Not that I thought anything was going to happen, but the fact that these black bears, they weren't scared at all. They weren't phased by me yelling at them or making loud noises. They came closer. The more I'd freak out and act like a psychopath, the closer they'd get to me, which, yielded great photography. But, if the wrong person, if these bears approach the wrong person who kind of doesn't understand bear behavior, I fear that something might happen to them. But hopefully you can enjoy some of these black bear images and some of these loon images and really kind of let some of what we talked about resonate. Like I said, today was mostly a rant session, and I apologize for that, but I really wanted to get this out to you guys. So hopefully you learned something, you took something away, something to stew on, think about. If you have any questions, drop them in the link. I'm going to do a question and answer video here in the near future coming up. Or you could, message me direct on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever, and I'll try to get some of these questions answered for you. But I hope you guys are all doing well. Hope everyone's being safe, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one. So cheers.